Welcome to our BTN Group in the Know webinar, The Upgrade Paradox, Why Strict Hotel Policies Leave Savings and Better Stays on the Table, with content sponsored and developed by Oversea. I'm Marianne McNulty of the BTN Group, here just for a moment to let you know how to optimize your experience on our platform. A benefit of joining us live is your ability to ask questions to the speakers. Type any of those questions at the panel, ask a question on the left side of your screen. If you want to save a PDF of today's slide deck, you can find that in Event Resources at the bottom left of your screen. It will be available to you at any time, or if you come back in later as well. Just at the top of the screen is speaker bio tab where you can learn more information about our speakers. Just remember to click back to the slides to see those advance on your screen today. At the end of today's 1-hour broadcast, please give us just a couple more seconds to complete the exit survey that will appear on your screen. Now it is my pleasure to introduce your moderator for today, Samuel Bassan, Customer Solutions Manager for Oversea. Sammy, the program's all yours.
Great. Thank you so much, Marianne. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. As Marianne mentioned, my name is Sam Bassan. I'll be your moderator. I work on Oversea's Customer Solutions team. So what that means is I'm in almost daily talks with our customers, our vendors, and internal teams on our hotel reshop tools, how they're working for customers, explaining the product, and I'm really excited to have this panel with me on the call today. We have a fantastic panel, and what we'll be talking about is how exactly strict hotel policies can sometimes cost more than what they save. So what I'll do now is pass the mic over to our panelists and allow them to introduce themselves. Holly, would you like to go first?
Happy to. Holly Gribble, Senior Director here at World Travel, part of BCD Travel. Been in the business 23 years. Thank you for having me on the panel today.
Thank you. Nicole, would you like to go next?
Sure. I am Nicole Del Sesto. I'm Senior Manager of Global Travel at Applied Materials. And for some context, we book about 750,000 room nights per year. In very specific areas for all of you wondering.
Great, thank you, Nicole. And last but not least, Hakeem, could you please introduce yourself?
So hello everyone, I'm Hakeem. I'm a Director of Product in Oversea for the hotel vertical.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So as I mentioned earlier, what we'll be tackling today is exactly how sometimes strict hotel policies can quietly force upgrades, kill savings, and sometimes not actually improve the travel experience for your travelers. So the first question I'll have to kick us off is actually for Hakeem. Hakeem, across the data that we see here at Oversea, what do we see about how often a strict hotel policy can actually block savings opportunities for that customer? And where are the biggest leakage points?
All right, so first I would like to clarify some wording because we want to distinguish here what we call the actual policies as configured with the TMC and with a booking tool, and what we call the reshop policies. Reshop policies are really about what is it that we, whenever we are looking and monitoring reservations, what are we allowed to rebook? In hotels, when we reshop, at least with Oversea product, we don't really touch the hotel itself, which means that we won't be having an impact on the overall policy when it comes to which hotels, etc. We only focus on any other available rate within the same hotel. And the thing is, you have to think of Reshop actually as a complementary tool to to the policies as understood in the industry and as configured on the TMCs, etc. Why so? Because basically you don't have that many criteria to define a proper policy. You can maybe set up a maximum amount per night and having that fine-tuned per city or per country. You might be able to set up, for example, how many days in advance a booking can be made to be in policy, and further things like that. But there is nothing that would block, for example, an employee, a regular employee, to make a booking that would be within policy, but that would be making a booking with, for example, a jacuzzi in his room, if it's within full policy. There are, well, if it's the, I would say, lowest rate around, that's great. But what if we actually, there is a rate and sometimes even an actual preferred rate negotiated by the organization and the hotel chain that is available, but that will not be applicable to that specific room. And that's where Reshop comes in a way that it is a tool that helps complement a little bit all these policies that are defined elsewhere with and giving back the control to the travel managers in what is it that we want to define as the guest experience and what do we want to allow, and if there are opportunities for savings can be made, Reshop will be able to capture these opportunities and make savings for the company. More or less, that's how it works. So when we say that we want to be more strict in terms of Reshop policies, usually it stems from risk averseness and not wanting to have any impact on the travelers. But then that it has to be balanced out with the missed out on opportunities in optimizing the program. And of course, we wouldn't do that across the board. We need to first identify well the different groups of travelers, for example, making sure that we don't impact our VIPs and our execs, but the regular employees. And for example, when we try to be very risk averse about Reshop and about impacting the travelers, of course, we leave opportunities on the table for making savings and optimizing the program. I will give two examples. First one is the bed quality. Usually in every room category on every floor, as you all know, you're all well traveled, you have either like big beds, like king size beds, or double queen beds. And it really depends on, usually we have single guest travelers, and it really depends on what was coming at the top at the time of the booking. What we also know is that most of the time we don't even get what is that we booked when we arrived at the check-in desk. And these differentiations between the bed qualities in terms of rooms actually are not really impacting the price, but hotels are performing a lot of, I would say, dynamic pricing. And therefore, you might be missing out on almost 30% of your savings if you wouldn't allow to switch from the one to the other. Another surprising thing about having strict policies around Reshop is that we found out that in more than 40% of the rebookings we do for all our customers, we always find an upgrade or another. It can be anything. It can be a bigger room. It can be a view. It can be. It's just that we not only found opportunities for savings, but improving as well the guest experience, which is counterintuitive.
That's really interesting, Hakeem. I really like the experience that you mentioned of booking something that's within policy, within the rate cap, but might have a jacuzzi. And then second, I thought it was really interesting what you mentioned, that sometimes you can book something at a hotel, but once you actually check in, there isn't exactly a promise that exact room type will be available. My next question will be for Nicole, and it is exactly on this topic, is when you originally built your hotel policy at Applied Materials, what were some of those trade-offs that you were balancing, like the ones that Hakeem was mentioning, such as amenities, room view, jacuzzi? I love that one. And looking back, are there rules that made sense on paper, but then in reality did they work out differently?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it is a balancing act, and you're always trying to balance savings and traveler experience. And we definitely ran into some of that. Actually, we ended up. I mean, sorry, it's a little bit conflicts with the tone of the webinar, but we actually ended up loosening some of our uh, restrictions to make sure that we were doing the right thing in terms of comfort, but there's a balance, there's a financial balance there as well, right? So we have 75% of our stays are 5 nights or greater, which is quite a lot. We have people who are on the road 300 nights a year, sometimes more, and that is a lot. And so what we first found when we implemented rate reshopping is that we'd go into a property like an Element, and we would have them, it would downgrade us from a room with a kitchen to a standard room. And then I've got somebody in a hotel for 90 days that doesn't have a kitchen. And so we had to actually loosen up some of the restrictions to make sure that we would keep the kitchen in. And then things, then things started going a little bit even more, where we would say, okay, our policy is that you book a standard room, right? And so a room without a jacuzzi. But then maybe we were moving somebody who's staying 6 months in a property from a 1-bedroom into a studio, and that maybe wasn't the best experience for them. And so we need to balance out the savings of $10, $15 a night on a hotel with, if we make this employee unhappy and they're going to leave, what is that going to cost us? And so there's a lot of things that you have to think about in your hotel program. But what has worked really well with us with Oversee is that we have the ability to customize like we've never had before. And so we now can program, don't move somebody out of a kitchen. We're working on something where we can say, if someone is going, going to be gone for 30 nights, it's okay to leave them in a 1-bedroom. So there's a lot that we deal with that is beyond savings, but also keeps us compliant within our program.
This is a really great explanation, and I think it also answers one of the questions we have in the Q&A, which asks, which KPIs should travel managers track to assess hotel reshop performance beyond simple savings numbers? And how do you calculate the trade-off between policy compliance and missed reshop opportunities? And I think what you're saying, Nicole, is that you have to take a look at the length of the stay, where they're going, the type of travel they're doing. Anything else you'd like to add to that question?
No, absolutely. But the soft dollar things, and the breakfast inclusion. I mean, I know we're paying for breakfast one way or another, but the breakfast inclusions and the for us, the kitchen. But you really need to know your program and talk to your travelers. And that's another thing, I'll talk about it a little bit later, but the ability to see information, the information that comes through with Oversee that can prompt us for discussions with our travelers is vitally important to us, because you don't necessarily always have those opportunities to talk to people who essentially live on the road. And so the program gives us insights that allows us to do that. But I'm jumping ahead and we'll talk about it.
Great foreshadowing. Thank you. And I think this is also a great segue for my next question for Holly. On the TMC side, when a client's program is performing well on the surface, but Reshop isn't getting as much savings as they would have expected, what does that usually tell you about their policy under the hood?
Great question. So when a client's program appears healthy at a high level, but reshop performance is lagging, it typically indicates to me and to our team that the underlying reshop criteria was too restrictive or didn't align with our actual travel behavior. So in this case, we would evaluate the specific reshop parameters currently in place, whether that's savings threshold, time windows, property filters, whatever that may be. We would compare that criteria against the customer's actual booking patterns, average booking window, how far in advance are their travelers actually booking, right? Any preferred property types, rate categories, what's included in their program. And then we would look at their frequently used hotel chains and brands. This analysis normally reveals there's some type of a disconnect between the policy design, what the company was trying to accomplish, and what their travelers are actually doing, their behavior. So we would work with them to adjust their criteria based on historical data to better match those patterns and significantly improve their reshop effectiveness without disrupting the overall performance of the program.
This is really interesting data that you mentioned here. And I think it's also going to bring in our next slide, which is when you take a look at the reshop activity across your client portfolio, what are some of the patterns that a single client could not see on their own, but let's say that you can see at the TMC level?
I love this question because it really highlights the value of the TMC partnership. One of the most common patterns we normally uncover is that we see travelers are booking their preferred hotel, preferred brands, or what property they want to stay at, but they're not taking the lowest rate within that category or room type. For example, a traveler may select a certain property, right? That's within policy and within the rate caps, but they choose a promotional rate that has double points or bonus points that comes at a premium. And that premium goes back to the customer, to the company. While the rate still falls within the maximum allowed on the booking tool, it can cost the customer, we see $15 to $30 more per night. And a lot of times when we bring a customer onto the Oversee tool, we'll see right away we can flush these out because you will see that a lower rate in the same category is available within 15 minutes, meaning it reshops it, and within 15 minutes we've rebooked it for the lower rate. So that's something that we can highlight for the customer. We can talk about, do we tighten controls? Do we continue to rebook? Do we get that information out to their travelers to let them know, hey, this is, while you're booking under a certain rate cap, it's not within our policy to get extra points just at a higher rate, just to make sure that you're getting additional points on your side. So that's definitely something at the TMC side, we can identify those patterns pretty quickly once we get our customers up and running on the tool, and we can capture that savings for the company. So we would rebook the same property, same room type, and the stay requirements, but without the added costs of the promotional perks. So I think this is just a great example of insight that just isn't visible to at the individual client level right away, but becomes very clear when you pull it all together, and we can walk the customer through the booking process and the data.
This is a great answer, and actually it brings me to one of the questions we have in the Q&A. I think it touches exactly on this, and what they're asking is, loyalty program compliance is a big topic for some corporations. It often conflicts with hotel reshop bookings because not all rates are eligible for loyalty points. How can this be viewed in the overall hotel strategy, and how should it be addressed to travel managers? So I think really the question here is asking is, hey, when you do reshop a rate that sometimes takes away from those loyalty points that a traveler was originally hoping that they could get, how do you address this with your customers?
I think visibility from the front end and talking through that from the customer side is important to make sure that the customer understands we're going to rebook that for the lower rate, but the traveler's not going to lose their points per se. They're just not going to get the premium points. They're not going to get the extra points that the company was in essence buying on the front end. So I think it's just important that the customer puts some information out to the travelers to let them know we are going to monitor that and reshop that. And if you see one-offs, right, we don't address the whole crowd. Let's just identify the one-off individuals who are doing that and let them know we've noticed that you're booking a higher rate. We are going to reshop that down to the lower rate, and maybe just educating them on the fact that that is coming at a cost to the program. Same thing on if you're choosing a specific brand, depending on how the customer sets it up. Is it going to reshop the same property, same brand, or is it opening it up to a broader scope? I think it's really just more about education from the traveler side to make sure the traveler knows that the company is going to continue to try to ensure their comfort, safety, and all the things and their preferences, but also ensure that the company gets the best value on the travel program as well.
Excellent. I think it's a really good strategy. And speaking of taking a look at some of that data and discussing it with customers, the next question I have will actually be for Hakeem. When we're taking a look at data and some of the policies beyond the data that we're looking at, what are the top 3 levers, let's say, bed type, cancellation, and amenity wise? Which one of those 3 is the one that usually gets the biggest amount of savings, and why?
All right. So the top contender, I already talked about it, is are the beds. So just allowing that flexibility, for example, between double queen and king will basically boost savings by 30% because of how because it's just a matter of availability at the time of booking, and meanwhile we're monitoring prices. And ultimately, it really depends on. It doesn't even guarantee what is it that you will get at the check-in desk. And the second thing is basically cancellation policy. We've noticed that whenever we have people that have a very strict cancellation policy, meaning by that, don't downgrade the cancellation policy at all. If it's rebookable until the day of the check-in, leave it at that. And we noticed that if we introduce at least some flexibility there to say, okay, let's say we guarantee that whenever we rebook, we guarantee that at least it remains refundable up to 1 day before check-in. Is it still acceptable? How many of your bookings actually get canceled on the last day? And then it becomes a data-driven discussion, and that can generate a lot of savings as well, 15 to 20%. Then we have a good contender as well is parkings. So this is where also we can be smart. In Oversea, what we recommend to do is to our default is to basically look at what is in there in the PNR. For example, if the PNR contains a rental car, obviously, if there is a parking with a reservation, we might as well make sure not to lose it. Same thing if we have a PNR that doesn't contain a flight, so we might assume that maybe the guests will be driving in. But what if there is a flight and there are no rental cars? Then most likely the parking spot will not be used at all. And believe it or not, that's a lot of savings as well when you accumulate it on thousands of nights and over a year.
So Hakeem, I really like what you mentioned here about the data, and sometimes, let's say, booking something more restrictive or more upgraded might be limiting. There's a question in the Q&A that I think is really relevant to this, and what they're asking is, are you seeing any meaningful shift in client appetite toward enabling more restrictive hotel rates to drive savings? Or are most markets still struggling to balance traveler flexibility against cost savings? So I think this question is really asking you is, hey, are more customers becoming open to being more aggressive with Reshop? And if they're not, why should they?
All right, so we have I would say 2 use cases. We do the most, I would say, frequent one is that it depends on whether or not the organization is used to have a Reshop tool enabled or not. So if they don't and haven't experienced that before, they tend to be pretty risk averse and try to make sure that there is no downgrade and no changes to the guest experience, leaving a lot of money on the table, pretty much more than half. And then you have people that are much more used to these Reshop tools, and they are becoming very mainstream now. And then we can see the opposite. It's pretty much what with the example of Nicole is a very good one. It is a very, very configurable tool. So as you learn about the habits and the specifics of your business, of your organization, you might want to address some specific type of travelers with a different kind of set of rules. For example, long stays. For example, VIP travelers. For example, you could
Great
say.
answer.
I want to be very restrictive on VIPs, and I want to be more flexible on my regular employees.
So what you're saying is you can customize per the traveler type. There's a lot of different levers that you can pull to make sure that that experience stays what the customer would like, right?
Yes.
Great. So I think on this note, my next question will be for Nicole then. Was there ever a time where you looked at some of the Reshop data and it surprised you? Were there ever any surprising insights that you used to change your policies?
Yeah, sorry, everybody. I am having some technical difficulty, so I am off camera for now. I am going to answer that question. Yes, the Reshop data surprises us with regularity. We do go in regularly, and we use this information to educate ourselves and educate our travelers. So we have a preferred hotel in Singapore, and all of a sudden everybody started booking this winter rate. Winter rate, there was this big long blurb about all the great things that you can get with this winter rate, none of which were breakfast. And so we use this. We went in, we saw that this was happening. We're like, why are they booking this room? And so we went to the travelers and said, hey, why are you guys booking the winter rate instead of the applied materials rate? And they were under the impression that this rate gave them club access, and it didn't give them club access. It gave them it took away breakfast. And so there was absolutely no benefit to them using this winter rate. So we've also found, errors in our programming. So things that we were doing that we didn't mean to do. We've now reassessed that downgrading room type. Right now we have a setting that's down, that won't allow us to downgrade room type. And we have learned that we really need to be able to downgrade room type to maximize savings. I think to the tune of like 3,000 reservations a month, we're ignoring that change, and we've got to add that back in. And so we're making some custom modifications. So I think if you actively manage your program and you are really looking at this data, it's going to tell you on a regular basis a very good and important story. And traveler behavior is a very important story to learn and understand. And the oversee data gives you that more than any other piece of data that we have about hotel booking.
I think this is a really interesting use case that you pointed out. And I'd actually like to bring up one of the questions again from the Q&A about taking a look at the difference between traveler behavior and then the policies that you have. The example in the Q&A actually asks about traveler booking 2 beds and then Reshop push them to 1 king bed. Do you have any insights or examples of how you could take a look at the data and see, hey, how can we pull the levers here to make sure that if a traveler really does need 2 beds, that we're giving it to them? Or is there examples where you could say, hey, more often than not, they actually don't need those 2 beds? And if so, we could exclude them or put in some policy lever there.
That is a really excellent question, and it has absolutely come up. It's difficult to do anything about that because we have no idea, right? When they book 2 beds, we don't know if it's because 2 beds were available at the time or they really wanted 2 beds. And it actually, that particular trigger actually caused us to create a policy that said don't change bed type. But then we were leaving thousands and thousands of dollars on the, thousands of dollars on the table. You didn't see my face, but it was very expressive. When I said thousands, here, I'll narrate my facial expressions for you. And we realized that, look, 99, 95, 90, 95 to 99% of the time we have a single traveler in the room and a king bed is just fine. And so we really had to balance out, yes, maybe we're going to annoy somebody sometimes when they get one bed when they were expecting two, but we can't set a policy based on the fact that someone might bring their family on one trip. There is a way, if they call, that we can put an override in. If the person says, I do not want two beds, I need two beds, don't downgrade me to one bed, then we can put something in the programming so that it wouldn't shop that particular booking. But as a general rule, we were missing out on way too much savings, and we had to adapt that policy back into the it's okay to change to one bed or vice versa.
Ooh, I think this is an excellent quote that I'm going to steal from you in the future. Is I think what you're saying is don't make a policy based on the one-off.
Exactly. And we do tend to do that. And then through data, we learn that that was a mistake.
So this is actually another excellent segue to our next slide. And the next question that I have for Holly is on the TMC side, exactly as Nicole was mentioning. How do you take these programs that are extremely risk averse, that do make their policies based on the one-offs? How do you bring data to the table to them to help them redevelop their reshop strategy?
Another good question. So when we work with organizations that are more risk averse, my first step is to understand what's driving the hesitation, right? Let's talk through that. And often these concerns are tied to perceived traveler disruption, as Nicole mentioned, things like changes to cancellation policy, room type, amenity loss, bed type. Specifically on our side, we have seen where if somebody needs two beds, we don't downgrade to one bed, but we will absolutely go from one bed to two beds. And to Nicole's point, you can absolutely put an override in there if there is someone who has to have two beds and you don't need that room touch. That is definitely something that we can do. So we've monitored that over time and taken customer feedback in order to modify that policy. So from there, once we figure out like what's driving the hesitation, we take a data-driven reshopping strategy. We analyze the customer's actual booking data, right? That's what we need to do based on their current configuration, booking windows, rate type, preferred chains. We identify what's currently set up to block, right? What's not being reshopped. Is that the bed type rules? Is it smaller savings thresholds? Is it rigid cancellation parameters that's limiting their savings opportunities? So where are they losing the money, right? And then we talk to the customer, comparing it against their actual booking patterns to say, hey, you've got this blocked. It's only happening 6% of the time or 8% of the time. What are your thoughts about talking to these individuals to see if what they're doing actually makes sense or if there's something that we can tweak? And then this is where the TMC comes into play. We're going to take that program and compare it against all of our accounts to see what looks good, right? What makes sense? What has worked in other corporations? And then we talk about the trade-offs with the company to say, hey, here's what it looks like from a savings side. Here's what you could have saved if we made this one small tweak. And then we get the customer to sign on or off if that makes sense for them. And we'll try it out because as with Oversee, we can modify things on the fly. You don't have to set it in stone. So we can work with the Oversee team to try some things out and then pull it back if we need to. So basically we test some small controlled adjustments. Maybe it's a certain group that we're testing out. And then we'll just monitor what type of savings we're seeing for maybe the next month or two, pull it up on the dashboard, share it with the customer, and continue to monitor the program. I always say, just like everything in travel is fluid and liquid, same thing on the hotel side. There may be changes that are happening within the organization, change to policy, whatever that may be. So I say you continue to talk about the travel program and try to find what works for the customer because all things aren't created the same. So instead of trying, it basically shifts the conversation from protect the policy to optimizing the outcome so everybody wins. And we do that through actual data.
Ooh, I like this last quote. Could you please repeat that? I think the audience would love to hear that. I think you said something about protecting the policy and over increasing the outcomes.
Yeah, it shifts the conversation from protecting the policy to optimizing the outcome. So, because that's the goal at the end of the day, right? The outcome being the traveler satisfaction, but also the company continue to save money and compliance.
That's an excellent quote. And I had one question in the Q&A that I was going to save to the end, but I think it touches on this exact point that you're making now, is have you seen evidence that an overly rigid hotel policy could actually increase downstream trip volatility through rebooking behavior? So items like exception handling, traveler workarounds, and if so, how can you help some of those organizations to quantify that operational cost? So I think really the question is here is, oh, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think ultimately, depending on how tight the hotel program is, right, you can get too restrictive, right? And then what happens is, if a traveler feels like it's too restrictive, we're going to see some leakage. They're going to book outside of policy, which is not going to help with duty of care, savings maximization, all the things. So I think it's important, especially on the front end and throughout the life of the program, is to continue to educate travelers about what the goals of the company are. What are we trying to do, right? We want to make sure you're safe. We want to make sure you're in a good area. We want to make sure you earn your points, right? But we also want to maximize savings for the customer from the company perspective. So I think it's just important that you continue to educate your travelers, but also use the tool to continue to evolve the program, if that answers the question.
That's great. Yes, thank you. And I think you touched on a really great point here too, is that one that we haven't really touched on a lot is traveler education. And I think it's important, as you mentioned, that a big piece in success about savings and getting the best value for customers is actually educating travelers on Reshop, on what's happening with the policy, on rate caps, etc. The next question I have is related to this, and it's for Hakeem. When you're taking a look at programs that get the most out of Reshop, what's the single biggest factor that separates them? Is it policy, configuration, something else? And how do you use that to educate program managers on what levers to set to get the highest performance?
What makes the difference between people making most or least on specifically on Reshop is how savvy they are and how data addicts they are, because there's a lot to uncover by digging into that data. For example, because we're monitoring almost all the traffic, of course, we cannot monitor bookings made last minute or bookings made on some very special rates or that are excluded from Reshop for one reason to another. But we do monitor a big fraction of the bookings, and we're able to extract a lot of information from that. First off, we're able to extract some booking behavior indicator and KPIs that can be very, very good for program managers in order to get a good understanding on what are the behaviors and how many people are making their bookings, how long in advance are they making them, what are they booking exactly, why are they not booking into my hotel preferred rates, why do they prefer booking, or how many of those are taking upgraded rooms instead of standard rooms, and so on and so forth. So that's that. First, really understanding better your program. Second, is leveraging rebookings and Reshop data to take it even further. For example, you might notice that you're making a lot of savings on a specific hotel or hotel chain where it appears that you don't have a preferred rate, and there is enough savings and enough rooms booked to actually go there and negotiate one. So it can also help with your RFPs. You also can find out opportunities to even renegotiate some of your preferred rates, because if we could bias the tool towards only rebooking your rates to your rates, making it more, and your rates to your rates, making it more of a, I would say, compliance tool rather than a pure savings tool. But if we keep it unbiased, you realize that you'll have a lot of bookings that have been moved from your preferred rate to a bar rate that turns out to be cheaper. So you can call actually foul play and have actual data to back it up and to come back next round of negotiations and say, look, you promised me I haven't got a good deal. I don't get a good deal. And then we are also trying to capture while we are monitoring prices, we also try to capture whenever we do not rebook a particular rate, we try to make sure we capture why. And how is that helpful? It is helpful because it allows you as well to, we will be providing you with information very specific on which are the amenities or the rules or the policies that you have in place that you could change that would impact most of your savings. And that really depends from a program to another. From some, it might be to say, for example, hey, you know what, you can basically double your savings. If you're saying, instead of not allowing to lose breakfast, allow to lose it if savings are over $100 per night, or 50 or 30. And then you can say one might as well like even pay it extra if the difference is big enough. On some other organization, you might say it's the cancellation policy that have a better impact. It's not touch the breakfast, but moving it from 24 hours to 48 hours, for example, window free cancellation up to 48 hours minimum before check-in, and by that you make half again more savings. So so the idea is really to be data driven. I think as well there are opportunities by looking at rebookings into understanding and identifying opportunities to educate your travelers even more. And I'm sure, I think we discussed that before, but Nicole is actually doing that. So I'm passing the bar to Nicole.
Actually, Hakeem, this is a great, and I'd like to go back just a moment to the first part of your answer to this question. You were touching on advanced purchase or advanced booking behavior. Is there any insights you can give the audience on the correlation between advanced booking and getting the most out of Reshop?
Obviously, hotel pricing is not as volatile as air pricing. We're not at the same level of complexity and dynamic pricing. But it comes to no surprise that obviously the longer in advance bookings are being made, the longest we have to monitor that price and to find savings. And also it highlights another booking behavior. You might notice that, for example, the flight are booked long in advance, but then people have the bad habit of figuring out the hotel last minute, and that might actually hurt a lot your overall travel budget, and that's something you want to educate your people on.
Great answer. Thank you. All right, Nicole, I stole your thunder, but I think I'll pass it over to you. What were the levers that made you decide to implement Reshop?
Oh yeah, well, it was a no-brainer for us. There's no downside to implementing hotel Reshop. Maybe there's not as much volatility as with air, but there is plenty of volatility. There are things we don't see. A great example right now is our headquarters is in a World Cup city, and they didn't get they blocked our rates and they blocked everything, but they decided at the last they didn't have enough rooms booked, and so they dumped a bunch of inventory, and we got a bunch of savings as a result of that. So that wasn't a decision. It was, in essence, it was a mandate. We need hotel rate reshopping. Everything with NLRA and LRA and dynamic pricing and all of these future things that the hotel companies are trying to do, we don't want to be on the back foot of that. And rate reshopping helps with that. And I think that that the ROI is, I don't know what the percentage is, 1,000%. The ROI is huge, and there was just no question as to whether or not we would implement it. I don't know if that helps anybody else, but the value's there.
No, that's great. And I think that you are bringing us to our next slide, which will be our last one as well, is when we're looking at the ROI, what are some items that you could take and bring into a QBR that you get from the Reshop reports? Or are there any metrics in there that, let's say, are vanity ones, but are actually very useful?
I personally don't think they're vanity metrics. They're hard savings numbers. It's not like they're not real savings numbers. Things we'd like to get a better understanding of what's happening at the point of booking. Was there an availability issue? Was the applied materials rate really not available? When did the rate lower? Was it 72 hours before departure? Was it the next day? And then what percentage of those rate reshops are happening? Are hotels inventory dumping at the last minute? Or was there an agent error or a traveler error when they originally booked? Those kinds of things are interesting to us. But when we talk about going to our executives, we give them one number. This is the ROI. Whether we give them a percentage or a dollar of savings, which is what we do dollar of savings. Those are the numbers that we present to our leadership, and those are the numbers that we report at the year end in our goals. But throughout the year, it's really important for us to understand the trends that we're seeing in the Reshop data, because that is going to tell the future. And we need to pay close attention to the future, because while air reshopping is of course great, our hotel spend is a good chunk larger than our air spend, and we can't mess around with getting into a situation where we're going to see as much volatility in hotel as we do with air.
First of all, thank you for bringing up the point of bringing the QBR data to your senior management. This also touches on one of the questions from the Q&A. How do we communicate the concept of hotel reshop to your senior management? Was there anything special you did when you first implemented Reshop, or just what are some of the data metrics that you like to show them?
Yeah, no, we didn't. We just turned it on and showed them the number. It's that simple. We also have a hotel desk for those situations where hotels are sold out, and we throw that number in there too. So we because we have so much extended stay, there's so much opportunity for waste that we have to be super vigilant about our program, and wherever we can drive those savings, we're going to drive them, because it's a very large number. And maybe on a percentage basis, the number isn't that big, but if we're paying 5 people's salaries because of hotel desk savings, then we call it a good year.
That's excellent. And thank you for explaining that story to the audience. Next question's for Holly. Same topic. It's the QBRs and the data metrics story of the ROI. When you're explaining to one of your customers the entire value that they're getting from working with you, what are some of the items that you bring in from Reshop that help you tell that story? Is it about upgraded rates, policy insights, something else?
So it's twofold. So I always get excited when we can show off the savings that we have for a customer, especially one that was a little hesitant to jump onto the program. So to me, on the metric side, I would say total overall savings and average savings per hotel booking. To be able to show that on a dashboard, to show it on the individual reporting to a customer is always great, because they can actually see in their program what they've saved, their average savings per booking, and how that all lined out. Part 2 of that is if they have a company negotiated hotel program, we can actually show them, based on that company preferred hotel program, how many times we rebooked their actual preferred hotels, whether that be through an individual property or through a chain wide. And we've seen some customers as high as 63% of the time we've been able to rebook their preferred hotel program through a chain wide or whatever that may be into a lower rate. So the customer spends a ton of time negotiating a hotel program, right? They work on the chain wides either through partnership with us as a TMC or on their own. And then you actually implement that hotel program. But it's good to see that on the backside, you're getting the best rate, whether that be through the chain wide, whether that be through BCD's hotel program, whatever that may be. And we can show all that on the backside. So I definitely think that's something that it's a visual for them, but it's got the detail behind it. So I think that's something that's very important for customers to see. Another part of that we do is the company can see how they were booking against other. We can talk about how they're doing against other companies. And then it leads into that discussion about, is your program too restrictive? Like we're seeing comparable results of X at this customer of 35%, you're at 12%. So let's talk about why that is. Let me show you what's restricted, and let's talk about whether that's really necessary for the program and where you can optimize and continue to save in the program. Hope that answers the question.
Yes, absolutely. And I think you touch on another interesting point here, and that is using Reshop to help you identify opportunities to negotiate stronger with some of the vendors. One of the questions in the Q&A asks, how can you more easily manage hotel agreement renewals? And I think specifically with Reshop data. And could you highlight a little bit more on some of those data points that you showed customers and how they can actually use them?
Sure. So in that specific case, we would work with you looking at your current program, talk about your existing vendors and where you're trying to go with that program. Is it a specific chain? Is it local properties? Whatever that may be. We would pull your historical data and we would talk about that. How many times did we rebook it? What do we rebook it from? How far out did we rebook? You know, what amenities were included, what amenities aren't included, in whatever the rate may be. So we would break it down individually on whatever your criteria would be, individual property, chain-wide, whatever that may be, using your actual data, which is great. And we can also show you, hey, we didn't rebook this, but there was an opportunity to save, and here's why we didn't rebook it, whether it was you don't allow, I don't know, 1 bed to 2 beds or whatever that may be. So we would work with you on the individual side to break down what you had from the last 12 months. Then you can look at your program for the next year to see what makes sense. You might find that there's some properties that you're constantly rebooking. So does it even make sense to have a static rate, or does it give you the leverage to go back to a hotel to say, hey, you offered us this rate. It's really not competitive. I can get that on my own, or I can get that through my TMC. We're giving you X number of room nights. Let's sharpen the pencil a little bit, or let's throw in an amenity to make that a little more enticing so the company saves. Maybe it's breakfast, whatever that may be. So we would use the data. You know, somebody told me once, don't expect what you're not willing to inspect, and you've got to inspect the data to see if it makes sense and what's happening within the company.
Great, thank you. I think that's some great advice for our viewers. All right, we are getting close on time, so I'll have one last question for Hakeem, then I'll bring us into our Q&A. Based on everything we've covered today, is there one last piece of advice that you could give travel managers in the audience to immediately improve the ROI that they receive from Hotel Reshop? What would it be?
I think I will be repeating myself. We've been hearing all during this this webinar, data, and I think that would be my final advice: use your data. And I've been already showing how Reshop data can help you improve or educate your travelers. It can help as well improve your sourcing activity and help you out with that. And ultimately, I would say use as well data to turn what would be a very emotional conversation around 1 or 2 complaints into a rational discussion and data-driven one and value-driven one.
Great, thank you, Hakeem. I think some of my favorite quotes today are 1 or 2 complaints to a rational decision-making criteria. And also, I think Nicole mentioned earlier is don't make your policy around 1 complaint. I think those are really interesting points. And lastly, I really love what we've heard from Holly about taking the data and using it as an education point to go over with your customers and also travelers on why certain decisions have been made. Thank you all. So I think we just have a couple minutes for some Q&A. I think this one, we talked a little bit about it at the beginning of today's webinar, but I would like to take a double click on it. Are there any positive or negative experience to share on hotel rate caps? I'll leave this for any of the three of you to answer.
I mean, we have hotel rate caps, but it is extremely generous. We're just trying to make sure that there's some kind of baseline so people don't go in and book a $773 hotel when there is a $300 one next door. So I think our rate cap policy is generous, it's global, and we don't block. Here's a great example. Munich is a great example. Munich always has something going on, and they easily, our rate cap is like $415. So if you are going to Munich during Oktoberfest, rates are going to be $500 a night. So all we say is you can't book it online. Call the agent. The agent looks, they see that all the rates are $500. They can book it because everybody's $500. So we really just use it as a guideline more so than we manage a hard rate cap. I think it's too hard. It's a lot of work. I don't think you get a lot of bang for your buck if you're doing it on a city level, but I know a lot of people do it that way. And, you know, maybe that is really valuable for them. It also really depends on where you're going. So we don't go to New York a lot. We don't go to Chicago a lot. And so it's easy for us to have a number that, excuse me, is a bit lower.
Great answer. Thank you. All right, I think we are at time. I want to thank everyone in the audience for attending today. We really appreciate it. And I'd also like to give a huge shout out and thanks to Holly, Nicole, and Hakeem. I think today was an excellent conversation. And I hope everyone in the audience can take some of the learnings that we have gone over today and apply them to your programs. Without further ado, I'll hand it back over to you, Marianne. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks so much to all of our speakers and to Hakeem and Nicole, Holly, and also to Sam for doing an excellent job moderating this discussion. We have gotten to an awful lot of questions, but any questions that we didn't get to, Oversee will respond to via email. Please give us just a couple more seconds to complete the exit survey that will pop up on your screen in just a second. Tell us how we did today in meeting your content needs, and also tell us of topics or speakers that would be of interest to you for future webinars as we plan the content for the rest of the year. You can learn more about Oversee at their site, and you can also listen to the replay or come back in to download the slide deck should you miss it from the archive of today's session, which should be available at the same link. You'll also receive an email in about 2 or 3 hours when that archive is available. We have about 24 other webinars, including several from Oversee, that are also on our BTN webinars page. Thanks again for joining us today. Goodbye.